Ladies and gentlemen, welcome back to Morning Shot. It's a really complicated Monday because the news over the weekend has been, well, complicated. Part of the reason for that is because according to the DA, they've put the NHI on ice. But maybe they haven't. Maybe they have. What else has happened over the weekend is Ukraine and Russia are once again in the news because Ramaphosa and John Steenhuisen can't agree on whether or not Ukraine's our friends or Russia's our friends. So they're having a dispute. In any case, before I get on to the main news stories, ladies and gentlemen, can I please remind you, please subscribe to the channel. It would really help everything that we do here. The greater the subscriber numbers, the greater the share numbers, the greater the likes, the more YouTube promotes the video. It's the usual YouTube stuff. And if you really want to support the work I do, you're welcome to buy me a coffee. The link is in the description box below. So let's get on to the main stories. Well, there's actually a few stories to talk about. The first is around this whole story around the NHI. Because apparently the DA said they were really pleased because during a meeting which was chaired by Paul Mashatile, the deputy president, they had successfully put the implementation of the NHI on pause pending a discussion of key points. So what did that actually mean in the world of reality? Well, nothing, actually, because it turns out that what actually happened at the meeting was that Aaron got really uppity, swore a lot of people, told them that he feels very passionately about the implementation of the NHI because it's a battle for the poor. And it's just rich white people that want to keep their medicals. Even though more black people in South Africa have medical than whites. But, is what it is. Arguably, we already have an NHI. They're called public hospitals. But they just don't work. Anyway, inconvenient truths for commies. That's a video for another day. But during this video, apparently Ramaphosa had to come out and say, Aaron, calm down. This isn't the right forum to just swear and shout and carry on like a banshee. And they said that they would pause the implementation of the NHI till January. So the NHI is paused in terms of the implementation. Only it's not, because it turns out that what's actually paused is the discussion of the midterm development plan. This is the plan where all the GNU parties get together and basically say what they're going to do during the midterm. Then they try not do it, loot the fiscus, the usual stuff. Anyway, this plan is being postponed till January because according to the rumor mill, nobody can agree on what they actually want to do. The DA says they don't want the NHI. The ANC, they can say they're going to do it regardless because Aaron's an idiot. So what's actually going to happen? Well, we don't actually know, but what we do know is that another dispute has now occurred between the DA and the ANC, and noticeably it was the whole address which Ramaphosa gave at the big conference which they're hosting in Russia. I covered this in a video last week, and I got lots of hate for it because people hate Russia for reasons. Anyway, let's not go into that again. But fundamentally, during the speech, what actually happened was that Ramaphosa said we value, South Africa that is, values Russia as a friend and ally. Well, they would do because they still think that the Soviet Union exists and they owe the Soviet Union a debt of thanks because the Soviet Union trained up some of the ANC guys and sent them AK-47s. So apparently they, friends forever. But they're also friends with Ukraine. And so the DA said, no, Russia's not our friend, Ukraine's our friend. And when are we inviting the Ukrainians over to be friendly with them? And this was really interesting because originally when Ramaphosa came back and they asked him, what do you think of John Steenhuisen's comments? He said, I don't know what you're referring to. Ramaphosa is actually being quite diplomatic at the moment. He doesn't want to jump the gun and just react based on, journo rubbish because he understands how the journo class works. And he basically said, well, I don't really know what it's about, but I'm sure, I'll find out sooner or later. What he has now found out. And he basically says, well, South Africa's non-aligned. He says it's been that way since the Freedom Charter in 1955. He says South Africa doesn't pick sides. We are friends with everybody, and we don't not get along with anyone, apart from Israel, because Palestine and stuff. Anyway, so during that entire debacle, Ramaphosa says, well, DA can be friendly with whoever. We're still friendly with Ukraine, he says. And Leon Schreiber said, well, what I'm actually going to do is I'm going to put in effect a visa-free agreement between Ukrainian international diplomats and various other people in Ukraine, special dignitaries, not just, the average smo, special dignitaries, they can come to South Africa visa-free. And he says, I've signed it, and now Ramaphosa must sign it to show solidarity with Ukraine. Now, he hasn't obviously asked the president whether or not he wants to agree to this, and Ramaphosa's spokespersons hit out and said, well, it's the DA acting rogue. The DA is just doing their own thing, and they're not allowed to. Why they're doing this, it's terrible. But it's interesting that that comment hasn't come from Ramaphosa directly. It's come from his spokesperson. I've said in previous videos, I hate that title. It's like really generic and dehumanizing. It's a spokesman. He's a spokesman. Anyway, he came out and he basically said, also the comments around the NHI, those were hollow. The NHI hasn't been paused. It's still an act of parliament and it will still be implemented. So what's actually going on? Like, is the DA and the ANC both trying to score points against each other? I don't know. It's a very difficult one to determine because it still looks to me like the DA, in some effect, wants to stay in government. They understand the importance of staying in government. But they can't get out of the habit or the mentality of acting as the opposition. They constantly want to be the opposition. But they're in government. They have to support the president. And so it was interesting that last week, Paul Mashatile and Fikile Mbalula came out and said, look, the GNU parties have to stay together and support the president. They shouldn't be undermined by any of the GNU parties, which includes John Steenhuisen and his love for Ukraine. And this is true. These guys are ministers in the president's cabinet. That means they serve at the leisure or the privilege of the president. The president doesn't want them to be there, he just fires them. They're not there because of the votes of the public. Remember, the president can appoint who he wants, and that's effectively what he's done. So they have to support the president. And the reason they did this whole, government and national unity in the first place was effectively to protect Ramaphosa in his second term so he can get on and just basically do what he wants. Because this is his last term. Remember, we have a 2-term constitutional right in South Africa. You can only serve 2 terms, a bit like the US. So they shouldn't really be undermining the president. And I'm reminded that in the weekend, another article came out. And this article actually is really important for us to talk about because the article itself was around the mass shootings in South Africa. Now, specifically, they're kind of in the Eastern Cape. Many of the effects are actually in my area. And a lot of them are occurring with high-level assault rifles, many of them stolen by the police or they're from the armed forces. And these assault rifles, they're not assault rifles, right? They're basically automatic rifles, sometimes machine guns, if you want to call them that. That basically means, automatic guns. Well, the type of firearm that's being used is, in many instances, AK-47s, sometimes R4s. They're military grade or they've been smuggled over the border. They're not what you'd call the run-of-the-mill 9mm that your ordinary person in the street carries. They're also not, your .22 bolt-action rifle that most of the farmers carry, because they deal with livestock and they deal with pest control. But interestingly enough, this mass shootings that are starting to occur, it's interesting that mass shootings in a civilian area has been occurring for decades. It's been happening in the Western Cape, specifically the Cape Flats, right? Everybody that's anywhere near the Cape Flats knows that. They've experienced that. And in many respects, it's kind of horrendous. But the problem that we are now seeing is that they're almost redefining what a mass shooting is. It used to be quite a lot of people. Now it's like, okay, 6 guys got shot by 1 shooter. Mass shooting. 4 guys got shot. Mass shooting. Like everything's a mass shooting now because it sounds scary and it makes good headlines. And in typical fashion, these headlines are being picked on by Gun Free South Africa, right? And Gun Free South Africa is saying, well, they're usual lies. And they are lies. They say, oh, all these guns were once legal. No, they weren't. They came over the borders. They were smuggled over the borders. The chicken wire borders that we have? Well, they were stolen from the army bases or stolen off police officers. Like, let's not kid ourselves that they were once legal as if they came from, the Afrikaans farmer who's looking after a sheep with an AK-47. Yeah, likely. Anyway, they're trying to push for gun control again. Now, the minute I looked at that, I'm reminded of the last amendment bill that Gun Free South Africa tried to push. And that was to remove the rights of self-defense from the ordinary citizen. They wanted to basically stop normal people having more than 4 firearms, which I think is a clone of the law in Botswana or Namibia. I don't know. I'm sure you guys will let me know in the comment section. And they wanted to limit the amount of rounds we have to like 200 rounds, even though most people shoot 200 rounds in 10 minutes in the shooting range. A lot of this at the time was deemed to be madness. And a lot of it was pushed back through coordinated effects by, well, the DA, civil society, NGOs. DS South Africa did their part, AfriForum did their part. Many people did their stuff. But I sit and I wonder now where the will be if this type of rubbish is pushed forward again, because it appears from a political perspective that things are fracturing. There isn't really a line to be drawn in the sand where people can kind of sit together and push a counter-narrative forward. We've seen this in the collapse of DS South Africa, of which Oman had a key role. And that's a video for another day. But we're also seeing it in the collapse of the DA as the official opposition. Let us not forget that the official opposition right now is actually the MK party, who just do infighting all the time. That's pretty much all they're doing at the moment, is they're vying for positions. We've seen this numerous times. The EFF are imploding at a rapid rate. So who would actually push back against such rubbish if they actually tried to push this legislation forward? And it's actually becoming difficult to say. It's the same argument that we are now seeing with the NHI. Who's there to actually push it forward? The DA's in government. And News 24 issued an article and basically said, well, the DA have had their victory. They've had their first victory because of the postponement. And this basically came on the backdrop of what the DA said. But it's untrue. It's really not true. So it's concerning. It's concerning because if you look at it, it looks very much like the left hand and the right hand of government don't really know what they're doing. The DA is still acting as the official opposition. The ANC are trying to act as the majority parliament. We've seen this in numerous news articles where they're effectively just trying to set the agenda themselves. We're meant to have this big program next year where everybody's going to sit around in this forum. We're all going to talk about, where we want South Africa to go. And this was meant to be a program set by the GNU, but apparently the ANC says now they're going to do this national dialogue themselves. And this led to Helen Zille coming out going, here's the ANC acting as if they won the elections. Again, it's like the ANC want to work with those that are propping up the support of their vote, but they don't really want to work with anybody. They want to act how they always have, and that is the majority party, even though they don't have a majority. And they're saying, well, policies put in place during the last administration need to continue because why wouldn't they? Well, the reason they wouldn't, ANC, is because you lost the elections. And the guys that come in get to basically change direction of whatever you've done. And you can't just say, well, everything just remains in place. You lost the elections, guys. You only got 40% of the vote. And we had a very low vote turnout. But again, my feeling at the moment is that politics remains rudderless. There doesn't appear to be a coordinated wall that can be pushed against anything really problematic. But that's just the way I see it. Maybe I'm wrong. I'm sure you'll let me know in the comment section below. I look forward to reading your comments. Until tomorrow, bye.